All right, so hold on, let me just, again, we're still under this stay at home social distancing ban and everything like that. So I just wanted to thank everyone for coming again for our soccer talk. This is our third episode, and we have some new guests, and I'll let you guys introduce yourselves in a second. And all we do here is basically talk. There's a lot of information, a lot of topics that we're going to cover today. Good, sad, and can't wait to get out. You know what I mean? Can't wait to get out there and go forward. You know what I mean? So, first off, we'll start off with you, Marco. I don't want to basically go into what you're going to be explaining.
Yeah.
By all means, go ahead, introduce yourselves, and we'll go from there. And then we'll go with Alison and go from there. Okay?
Sounds good. So, hey everyone, as you can see, my name is Marco Trimboli, and I am a performance coach at a company called, as you can see behind me, Box Out Performance. And we are, just quickly, we'll go into it more further, but we're a mental development company. And as you see there, my partner there, Abhinav, introduce yourself.
Hey guys.
So he's actually the co-founder of Box Out. He created it there. So that's just a little just on us, and we'll get more further into detail as the session goes on.
Sweet. Also, we also have Alison. Thank you for coming onto our little webinar soccer talk there. Again, if you just want to give yourself a little intro, you're out in Barcelona. The weather must be fantastic out there, nice and hot. I'm trying to copy you here with 15 degrees in Canada, but that's as best as it's gonna get right now. So go ahead, Alison.
Yeah, so actually it's a rainy day, so it's not the greatest. But yeah, so I'm Alison Lemon, born and raised in Mississauga, Ontario, former professional international football player, and I also represented the Canadian national futsal team in the World Cup in 2013, and currently working on a psychology program in sports.
That's awesome.
Awesome.
Awesome. And we got Neil Wainwright. He's been our we're myself, Neil, Lewis, and Chris are probably the panelists now for this soccer talk. So Neil, just give a quick bio again, if you don't mind, and then we'll go from Lewis and Chris, and then we'll get this started so everybody knows each other. Go ahead, Neil.
Yeah, I'm a former professional footballer in England. Played for clubs such as Sunderland, Darlington, Wrexham, Morecambe. Ended up at Morecambe as a coach, and I've been coaching there under 18s now for the last 7 or 8 years now. So fully fledged over to the dark side of coaching now. So.
And Lewis, you're up, buddy.
Yeah, okay. My name's Lewis. I'm currently studying a Master's in Advanced Football Coaching and Performance. I currently work in the women's game and the senior women's game. And I've also worked in foundation phase and youth phase football in academies. That's all from me for now.
Awesome. And Chris?
Chris Broom. I assist Christos with his academy team with AIFC. I also coach 2 teams with Storm FC in the travel division. So the 2009 girls, which are in U11 this year, and the 6 girls U14 team in regional play. I've been director of travel for the club, and actually Coach Lewis is one of our grant opportunities several summers ago to come and do the development program for a couple of the summers with Storm. So that was a lot of fun. And kind of wondered, but so this all figures itself out. But yeah, happy to be here. Which leaves us with you, Coach Christos.
Myself, yeah, Coach Christos, head coach right now for Storm FC. Coaching at AIFC with U16 Girls Academy, going through all my licensing and credentials. Currently have my national B Part 1, working on my Part 2, in the works of finishing my technical director course, and currently enrolled in the National Youth License for Canada. So Yeah, a lot of work on the go, a lot of online sessions, a lot of online content. So I think by doing the soccer talk, I think it gives us an opportunity again. I've had you guys as guests before, and I think it's a fantastic way to connect. You know what I mean? Connect with each other and and see what we can do to develop our young athletes, right? So it's not just Canada based; it's all over. You know what I mean? If we can benefit from here and transfer them over in some way, that would be fantastic. So we'll just start off with we'll talk about the mental side of the game. Okay, so one of the key things is with Marco. I had the pleasure of meeting Marco. Is one of my players has gone through is going through the program of box out, and I've just read up. I read the analysis and the report on the player, and I must say, the detail behind it is amazing. It's definitely something that not just here, but on a global standpoint should be looked at because it really hits everything. And yeah, Marco, if you want, you could go ahead on that and just touch a little bit base on what you guys do, because I think it's honestly, when I saw the results and I was reading the detail, it is amazing, amazing. This I personally think this should be incorporated in all academies, especially in not even just soccer, but even for your own self. So.
Absolutely, right? So give it time. Eventually, it will be mandatory all over the place.
That's awesome.
But yeah, just going based off that, Abs, did you want to take over here, or just you want me to do something quick?
Yeah, actually, you know what? Let me just quickly introduce myself. I felt I probably missed the memo what I was supposed to say the first time around. So,
no worries, sorry, buddy.
Guys, it's nice to meet you guys. My name is Abhinav. Most people call me Abs for short. If you forget that, six pack. And if you forget that, then you need box out training. I worked for Maple Leaf Sports Entertainment for the early part of the 2010s. I was there for about 5 years, working closely with Toronto FC, the Leafs, the Raptors, Marlies, again, all the MLSE teams. And as I was working for those teams, my role was in the area of business development and community engagement. So although my role was on the business side, I know personally for me, I have a huge passion for the performance side of things. And I wanted to know what makes these elite athletes tick and how are they staying in the best shape of their lives to be able to perform on and off the field of play. And one of the things that I guess, you know, we have quite an esteemed group here. So maybe all of you have had this perspective of what goes on with the elites, with people at Barcelona, with guys at the NBA, NHL, MLS level, and beyond. But most people realize that in the sports field, an athlete will have a head coach, sure, right? An assistant coach, absolutely. Strength and conditioning, you expect that. But beyond that, what I saw was just eye-opening. They had nutritionists, they had chefs, they had psychologists, they had chiropractors, they had orthodontists, they had sleep therapists. They were getting performance bedding and performance pillows and performance pajamas and just stuff that you wouldn't imagine. An entire team of 15 people dedicated to every single athlete. And even beyond athletes, like even some of the executives were giving access to this kind of stuff so that they could be optimized to perform on and off the field of play. And when I saw this, you know, it really, to me, it struck a chord of like injustice. And I was like, wow, like I never got anything like this. You know, all of these other people I know, people in the community, people like Marco, my nephews, nieces, everyone, we never even knew about stuff like this, let alone getting access to, you know, resources to improve these things. And so at that point, it became a passion project of mine to like somehow create a bridge between what was available to the world's elites and really the other 99% of us. And maybe you guys are part of those 1% elites, so no offense there. But really to create a bridge between the masses and what the world's best had access to. And as I started doing this and meeting with some of the brightest minds in the world and top researchers from academies and institutes all over North America and the world, really, I actually left Maple Leaf Sports, which was probably the hardest thing ever just to get in. And then I decided to quit and travel and meet with some of the smartest people that I could find for the next 2 years, really teaching myself everything about human performance. And as I started doing this, something became very apparent to me that never got taught to us in school that never even comes up in the field of development of young athletes. And what I understand is, you guys are great coaches and teachers, so maybe this is something that you're familiar with, but perhaps even you guys weren't taught this as well. But the reality is, before we can make a single move, before I can have this conversation with you guys, before a player can kick a soccer ball, before anything happens, there's an entire series of steps that takes place inside our heads. First is that we see and sense. 90% of the information that comes to our brain is from our eyes. After we receive all of this information, we have to process it. And I know most of us here, do you guys all use a smartphone?
Yeah.
Just to paint a little picture of like how much is going on here. So you guys are using maybe an iPhone or a Samsung or OnePlus One, one of those, right? And
yeah, Samsung over here, yeah.
Perfect. And would you say the memory of your phone is somewhere between 8 and 64 gigabytes?
Yeah.
Roughly, right? And do you think this phone is going to last you forever? Or how long does it take to get to that point where you can't even take another photo, you can't even download another app, you can't do anything until it just bothers you? How long does it take to get to that point?
Not long. We just send everything to the cloud.
That's true. That's true too.
The
Thank you,
cloud is
technology.
That's it, the cloud. It's up somewhere up there. I don't know where it is.
Absolutely. So, from my own experiences, what I've heard from people, within about 2 years, that brand new phone turns into a brick and you just can't do anything with it. You have to chuck it and you got to get another one. And the one thing is, we feel that our phones are very smart, right? They're smartphones. They're almost supercomputers. They can do everything. Our brains process 109 gigabytes of information every second.
That depends during the day, right? Because in the morning I probably go 59 gigabytes.
Yeah. You have those system variabilities, I'm sure, but it's just staggering to think that our phones are capable of 64 gigabytes and they run out of that space, right? Our brains have 109 gigabytes capacity, and we have no hardware upgrades, no warranties, no swaps, nothing. You have one for your life. And every single day, you're taking in all this new information. Essentially, it's like slowing down the processing speed of your brain. And so with players, with coaches, with everybody that has a lot of responsibilities on and off the field, you want to make sure that they're optimized, that their processing speed is operating at max, that they're able to quickly process all that information that they're gathering. And the final step is to make a decision. This is a function of your character, your personality, and your mindset. And everybody talks a lot about this, right? Everybody talks about mindset. But what I've never seen is somebody quantify it and put numbers to it and measure these things, be able to provide a common framework for parents, for athletes, for coaches to all be on the same page and actually support the development of that individual. So over the last 4 to 5 years, what we've created at Box Up Performance is a very holistic system, a way of looking at people that has never been possible before, unless you were in the 1%ers already, with the Premier League, all the major sports leagues, etc. And I'll let Marco talk about it a little more. He came on with us about 2 years ago. He was just looking for something aligned with his passions. He loved sports, he loved helping people, and he was just looking for something, and he finally stumbled across Box Out. We were still a startup at that point. But now we have a staff of about 10 performance coaches, and we're working with the Canadian Armed Forces. We're working with sports organizations, companies, schools. And really, we realized after a few years that mental performance goes way beyond sport. We use it every single day. As a father, as a manager, as a coach, as in any of those positions that we play, we're always using these abilities. So what you see on that sign behind Marco, it says neck up, check up. If I was to ask you guys a question, and you don't have to say anything, you can just maybe wave your hand or whatever, but have you ever had a physical?
Physical? Oh, yeah.
Right? And if I was to ask you, sorry, Louis, did you put your hand up for that one? Have you had a physical at any point in your life? No?
No.
Okay,
No.
You should get one.
Yeah, you should get one for sure, yeah. Louis, off you go.
Yeah.
So what most people say is that, of course, you got to get a physical. You got to get a physical. Get one every single year. And did you get one because something was wrong with you, or even more just maintenance and like preventative kind of care, right?
I would say personally for me, it's just maintenance.
Absolutely.
Preventative care. You just want to make sure all the bells and whistles are running smooth, all the joints are lubricated, and
That's
I don't want
it.
to see any. I don't want to see any flare-ups and stuff, right? So
You have one body, that's your engine, and you want to take care of it. But the same way I
Exactly.
just explained to you, you have one set of eyes, one brain, and really one personality. I would hope, just one personality, right? So with,
that's next week's topic.
so with all three of these things, I mean, you have one of them, and the same way you get a physical every year, what we're trying to create is the concept of getting a mental every year. And if we called it a mental, people would look at you crazy. Like if I said, "Hey, Lewis, have you had your mental this year?"
Yeah.
Everyone's thinking, "Oh, what's wrong with Lewis? What did this guy do?" But if we say, "Lewis, have you had your neck up checkup?" All of a sudden, it makes sense, right? Get your neck up checkup. Why not? You got your physical. So we're working on this kind of framework to make mental health, mental performance more standardized, the way it already is for our body. And we know it takes some time. Like we've been ahead of the curve for a little while, and the biggest challenge is educating people. But once you really start to take this perspective and looking at mental, we measure 55 things above the neck, 55 things that have never been possible to measure before for most people. Everything from how clearly you see, which the optometrist tells you, but beyond that, depth perception, reaction time, contrast sensitivity. Like soccer is an outdoor sport. You're playing in sunny, overcast, rainy, cloudy, all these different conditions, which can affect how you play. So contrast, go, no go, eye-hand coordination. Then there's all sorts of things related to your brain, reasoning, memory, attention, problem solving, coordination. And then finally, mindset. And I think this is the part that maybe Christos had a chance to take a peek at. But this includes things like mental toughness, coachability, decisiveness, composure. We talk about all these things, but we've never had a way of measuring it and actually helping people improve. So that's what we created. It's a program that will first measure all these things, and then for each one of us, provide a customized or personalized development program. The reality is what Alison might need to work on is way different than what Chris or Neil might need to work on. We're all different people, right?
Of course.
The first realization is that no two people are the same. So why have we always relied on cookie cutter training? I'm the coach, you're my 30 athletes, go do this. I'm the teacher, you're my 30 students, go do this, right? That's always been how training and development has worked. And now we have a way to completely personalize it for people. So it's really fascinating. People are seeing really, really drastic results from it, as we expected, but the word is starting to get out there now. Christos, how did you come across Marco?
One of my players on my U16 girls team, she went and did it. She did box out, and then Marco sent me the report on it just to see the strengths and weaknesses in that player. And one thing that I enjoyed a lot is basically as coaches, when you're coaching a team, is you, especially at an academy level and then even higher level, you try and execute a certain standard, okay? But like you just said, people are going to interpret and perceive things differently. So with this report, it really shows me as a coach, it really gives me the numbers and helps me to identify where the weaknesses was in this player. So when I'm doing a coaching session, I know that if I run a team session, I can go and do an individual one, just quickly throw out some key pointers that will basically ignite and fire off for her to continue on and play her game, rather than not seeing that and then expecting certain standards. You know what I mean? So it's a really good tool because when I was talking to Marco earlier, I think that coaches, and I think I've talked to many of you before here, I think coaches are too infatuated into championships, wins, this is what we got to do. They're not really looking at the mental breakdown and how we perform. Are we having good days, bad days? You know what I mean? I could be saying it simply, and the player could be looking at me and not registering it. So these are things that when I saw that report, for me as a coach, when I looked at it, I was like, wow, you know what I mean? That makes sense now. That makes sense. But it's a good tool to use to help. That's what we do as coaches: help, develop, build as much as we can. We're not here just to. That's why I coach. Everyone else has their own different meaning behind it, but I'm here to help. I'm here to develop you from the best I can from one to another. And if I have the tools, because I do construction as well as my day job. If I don't have the tools, and I'm not going to build things, you know what I mean? So if I don't have a skill set, I'm not going to cut woods with a knife, with a butter knife. You know what I mean? So you need the tools in order to build. So that goes with soccer as well. You need the tools to basically peak at your performance. You know what I mean? So I think it's fantastic to see that. So that's how I came across it, and the reason why I brought you guys on again. I think you do fantastic work. Alison as well. We've had talks before. You've come and talked to our girls. Huge, definitely huge motivator. You know what I mean? And your work ethic, and you've come out and said, don't worry. You know what I mean? You're gonna have good days, bad days, but it's how to overcome those obstacles, right? So.
And going based off that, Christos, is just quickly just saying is like we all see it as coaches, we all see it as players when we used to play in our days and stuff. Is we know we're not understanding something. We know we don't get what the coach is saying sometimes. But what we're afraid of is asking the questions. Is we're afraid, hey, coach, can you repeat that? Especially around a group of our team, because we don't want to look different. We don't want to look like, oh, we're the weak link, right? Because we all know how that comes in, steers in. Bullying comes into effect. Or what's wrong with this person? How do you not understand that? What's wrong with you? All this kind of stuff. So people tend to hold everything in. With this kind of neck-up checkup, this gives us all an idea how you perceive this information, how you understand, how you take it in, how you handle all this, the situation, motivation-wise, praise-wise, criticism, all that kind of stuff. And that's what you saw, Christos, and that's what we were talking about. At the end of the day, what we're all doing, unless they're asking questions, unless they're really telling us who they are, we are all guessing. Parents, coaches, everybody, we're all guessing. We're hoping.
We won't even go to parents, but never mind.
But you know what I'm saying? We're honestly, we're all guessing at the end of the day. We're like, I hope this is working, what I'm telling you. Please, God, I hope it, but we don't know. We can think it is, but we don't know. Go ahead, Alison.
Sorry, I just want to kind of touch base on that. Something that I find, that's going to be coming up in my psychology program for sports is communication between athletes and their coaches. And one thing that I started doing about 6 years ago was using the love languages to talk to my players. I found that was really helpful, just identifying how they accept love or what they need, because, you know, you can talk to them in a lot different manners on the field. You know, some players learn better as individuals or in group discussions, or some people, you know, need to be physically moved on a field, or, you know, they need like a high five, or they need to be motivated verbally. It's so important to know your players, but also for your players to know you. Absolutely. Like as a coach. And like for me personally, like I need acts of service to know I'm appreciated. So like if a player picks up a cone for me, even just something like that, I'm like, wow, like that's really nice. Or like if someone, you know, helps me with equipment to my car, or comes early to training, it shows me that they have an intention to perform and be better. And like I'll probably focus a little stronger on that player because they're showing me their initiative.
Absolutely, that's key, right? Just like I say, I love when people ask questions, whether it's coaches, parents, whatever it is, because that shows me you want to learn. Yeah. Asking questions, always thought was bad, but that shows me you want to learn. And just to go quickly, one thing on the visual side that we measure, and I know Christos, when I told him this one, he was like, yeah, this happens all the time. You remember this one, Christos?
Yeah.
All right. So just to go with one of the perception span in the visual assessment we do, what do you guys get from perception span? What does that mean to all of you? Abs, you can't answer. I know you know the answer.
Like perceiving like the environment, or like.
Yeah, pretty much like that. It's like taking a mental snapshot of something and see how quickly you can remember it and bring it onto the playing field. So has everyone here coached or is coaching now?
Yeah.
Okay. Yep. So how many times do you see this with your players? All right, guys, I want you here. Alison, you're here. Chris, you're there. Christos, you're here. Neil, you're here. You're here. And they're all in the circle. Okay. They go on the field. You're like, what's going on? You guys are not doing anything. What's going on? Does that ever happen?
No.
Yeah, it does.
Right? And that's just.
I'd lie if it doesn't. Yeah, but it does. Yeah.
And again, until they ask questions and say, hey, coach, can you repeat that again? We don't know, right? We're thinking, okay, they got it. Go on the field. But again, we're guessing. We don't know, but we can get this measurements to see, okay, the perception is low. Let's work on this. Let's build this up. Let's train it. Let's develop it. Just to give you some of the aspects that we measured there.
That specific example Marco just brought up, I used to coach youth basketball, 13-year-old kids, bantam boys, and I did it for multiple years. And, you know, as a coach, you don't see these kids every day, right? You see them on your practice times. You see them on your scheduled times per week. But aside from that, you just hope that they're doing the right things, the things you're telling them to do. So often I would get into a situation, draw it out of play, tell these kids what to do. We practice it 100 times in practice. They could do it no problem. The moment the game comes, they go out on the court and they're completely lost. You're like pulling your hair out. You're like, what is the problem? We went over this 100 times. We've talked about it. You know this. And they just get like deer in headlights and they lose it. And I remember back then, before I had all this knowledge that I do now, I would just think, oh my God, this kid is a complete idiot. He just doesn't get it. There's something wrong with him, you know? And then moving onwards, we did all this testing with the teams and we found out, okay, you know what? This kid's short-term visual memory is actually quite below par. It's not that he wasn't coachable. It's not that he wanted to be a rebel. It's not any of these things, but it's just things below the surface that you and I can't see. Things related to his brain or his eyes. And without knowing this, we're not able to give our players the kind of care and love and attention and development opportunities that they deserve.
So how do you test that then, Abs?
You know what? Actually, Christos, I don't want to, impinge or.
No. This is soccer talk, my man. So, no, you're not impinging or anything like that. So.
I don't want to mess up your framework, but you've seen a report. I thought it might be valuable for these guys to see sample report because they probably don't have an idea what we're talking about. Would that be valuable if I shared something for you?
100%. I think that'd be great.
Okay, give me 1 second. This is your show. I'm just here to help.
No worries, man. You know what? You know where soccer talk came from? I'll tell you, and I'll be completely honest. We used to do this at Boston Pizza, okay? We used to just sit there for hours, and Lewis is laughing, and we just have fun because we're passionate and we want to develop players and talk about soccer. You know what I'm excited about too is talking with you guys, and even more now tomorrow. What's it called? Bundesliga. Well, Bundesliga's on today, Bundesliga's on tomorrow, so I can't wait
to watch some of that.
That's amazing. So guys, anytime we work with an organization, we provide them with their own reports. And to be honest, when we're working with people, we even custom brand it for them because our goal is not to make Box Out be the best brand name out there. Like, it's not about us. For us, it's about the development. So if we're working with the Toronto FC or a different club, you'll see their colors, their logos, their branding, and we're just powering it for them. Now, this part here is interesting because many people look at an athlete and they use the eye test, right? I'm looking at this guy. I can see that he's pretty talented. He's got good footwork. He's got good speed. Most people just rely on that eye test. What we do when we look at an athlete is we break it down into these kinds of areas. We looked at their biometric. These are God-given things. What's his height, his hand sizes, things like that you can't control. Biomotor, many people think of speed, strength, agility, the basic sexy ones. But beyond that, there's a lot more like balance, coordination, flexibility, stamina, endurance, and beyond. Shot analysis, we'll skip over that one. That's a basketball specific one that we do. But what I really want you to focus on is the bottom three here. Sorry, the bottom three. The visual, the cognitive, and we call it the my-edge or the peak performance psychology. This scientifically is proven to be 90% of performance. Would you agree with that, or does that seem too high to you? What would you have thought?
No, I agree with that.
So is that top 2%, isn't it?
What I'm saying is the visual, the cognitive, and the character, those three components make up 90% of performance. And I'm asking, do you agree with that?
Yeah.
And you know what? I'm not surprised. You guys seem like really smart people and you agree with it. But then if I was to turn the question around and say, are you using the same kind of split in training your athletes? Are you spending 90% of the time working on mental concepts or helping them develop in that area and 10% on the physical? Because that's what you've told me you believe that's what performance is. And that's where we usually see the biggest disconnect. A lot of people recognize this, but they're not necessarily able to put it into practice. I'm going to skip over.
Sorry
Go ahead.
to interrupt.
No, go ahead.
Is this something where you can incorporate into your practices, or does this something have to be done by the individual? Because during your practices, and say you're practicing 4 or 5 times a week, then your rest, and if you're going on a microcycle, then what you need to do is make sure that, because this can be, let me rephrase the question. Would this be mentally straining for players to do something like this? You know what I mean? Because you're going to get the physical aspect behind doing your training, Now, on the mental aspect, will this be draining as well? So if it was, then you would.
Before I even answer that question, I understand that question. Before I answer it, is it draining when you're playing in a championship game and running around in the 80th minute and using all your mental abilities?
Yeah,
Is that draining?
Of course, yes.
And that's how you play the game, right?
Right.
You're using all of these things. You're forcing yourself to do this, even when you're tired and running on fumes. You still have to do it. And those are the people that we look at as the top performers. They can do it even when they're tired, right? So
Michael Jordan.
Exactly. And because we know that you use all of these skills in an integrated way when you're playing, why are we not training that way? That's the biggest frustration to me. Like, sure, it could be taxing on the kid, and sure, it could be draining, but for him to be able to do that when the lights are on, when the pressure's on, he has to be able to do that in practice as well, right? So hopefully that answers your question. Yes,
No, it does.
You can do it as a team, and they should also be doing it individually, because when you're exhausted, your brain is tired, your legs are tired, and you still have to perform with 10 minutes left in the game, that's when all this stuff really kicks into play. And if you have these skills highly developed, then you're basically running on autopilot, right? You're on cruise control.
It makes sense. It makes sense because you would be just even going back to the grassroots level for soccer. What we've been doing as well is doing a lot of ball mastery and with the younger ones, and then as you get older, strength and conditioning. But as you keep a repetition there, you're building that aspect. But this is something you could build as well. So then you get the complete player, right? You get the overall package. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So let me just zoom in on this one a little bit, and I'll show you guys what you're looking at. So this particular report, I'm not going to go too into depth. I know you guys don't want a full Bill Nye analysis here. But essentially what you're looking at is, imagine this kid was your player, Kyle. You've seen him on the field. You know he's a good player, and you know he has potential. And maybe you're trying to help him fast track to college or get a scholarship or whatever. What you have no idea about, perhaps right now, is maybe how does his eyes work, right? How does his vision actually work? What does he see? Because what you see is not necessarily what every player sees. So the first concept I'm going to explain to you guys is the concept of 20/20 vision. What does 20/20 vision mean to you? Do you feel like that's terrible? Do you feel like that's perfect? What does that mean to you?
It's perfect clarity, isn't it?
That's a common myth. So today I'm going to be Mythbusters. 20/20 is not good.
It's not, is it?
20/20 is not good. 20/20
I'm not there, so I have mine. So I'm way past that.
20/20 is average, simply average. The optometrist's job, Lewis, is not to make you the greatest person in the world and saying, hey, Lewis, you got 20/20, you got the best vision in the world, buddy. Their job is just to make sure you're normal. Are you operating like an average human being? That's 20/20 vision. Through research that we've done and our partners, we know that the average of a player in the Premier League, in the NBA, NHL, NFL, MLS, military, etc., for high performance groups, the average vision is 20/13. So that might just all sound like a bunch of mumbo jumbo and numbers to you guys, but let me explain what it means. 20/13 means that what you, Lewis, with your 20/20 vision, what you see from 13 feet away, somebody who has 20/13 vision can see that from 20 feet away. So take 7 steps back from where you are and see the same level of detail and clarity. And now when you think about games and you think, oh, how did this guy make that pass? How did Ronaldo see that guy? You'll realize that oftentimes their vision is about 50% better than normal human vision. And some of the best players, they have 20/7. So it's fractions. Wow. What's 20 divided by 7? Almost 3, right?
Yeah.
So that means they see 3 times better than an average human being.
How can I get that? How can I get that in glasses?
Unfortunately,
what lens? Do I need like a Nikon lens or something? I don't know.
Binoculars.
A really good question.
You gotta get the binocular lenses and put them on top of your glasses.
Gotta get the zoom. So unfortunately, the only way to improve your visual clarity is through contacts, lenses, or surgery. And it's hard to get enhancement up to that kind of level. Like, this is natural. You're born with this, right?
So I'm done. My dreams are finished. I'll
I'm
just
sorry,
stick with what I do.
But all these other 9 things, you can improve all of those. So the visual clarity, you can't improve. This is God-given. But all of these other ones, you can improve. And most people didn't know that. So your contrast sensitivity, your depth perception, your near far quickness, your perception span, these are skills you might not even have known you had, let alone improving them. So on this chart, you'll see we can compare an athlete to a specific sport, a position, and a skill level. In our database, we have elite and professional Premier League 1 players. We have amateur and retired and grassroots, single A players. So you can compare to a specific group and get your strengths, your opportunities. We never call them weaknesses. They're only your opportunities because you probably didn't know about them. And then finally, an improvement plan for each person. The numbers you see here, these are basically percentiles. So if you see a 25, you were better than only 25% of the people that you compared against. The ideal result is you'll see everything on the outside. This is just vision so far. So after we look at the person's eyes and how they're sensing information, immediately looking from this, I can tell this player is really going to struggle playing midfield because, and his position was midfield. He's really going to struggle because his near far quickness is quite low, meaning for him to switch that focus of his eyes from looking back to looking far, looking close to looking far, which you have to do as a midfielder thousands of times in a game, he struggles with that ability. His depth perception was a 1. So when it comes to putting himself in position for headers, when it comes to understanding how far he is from other players and spacing and how far he is from the net, he struggles with those things.
What's the grade level for 1? So from 1, what would be 1? 1 is the lowest. What would be the optimal?
99.
Whoa.
These are percentiles.
Holy smokes. Okay.
Yeah. So
All right.
that was first percentile, and then 99 would be the best. You're better than 99% of others.
So this player here, Kyle, is at a 1% depth perception.
Yep. And a 91 in reaction time. And you know what? As we were talking to the player, one of the things that we learned was that he felt his depth perception was amazing. Never dropped a ball, always in position. And he's like, this doesn't make any sense. And then we looked at it more. What's his reaction time score?
Hold on.
You guys see the reaction time?
Yeah. That 84?
91.
Oh,
The reaction
91%. There it is. 91% percentile.
So his reaction time was compensating for his lack of depth perception and near far quickness and other things. So he wouldn't see it until the last second, but then when he saw it, he could react. But what we realized is if we were able to improve these things, he'd be able to improve his performance a lot more because he wouldn't be waiting to react until the last second. So that was just vision. After vision, we look at the brain. And before somebody can become a high performer, you guys all know this, you have to have good well-being. You have to be a well-rounded person. You can't be isolating yourself. So social well-being, cognitive well-being, your brain has to be functioning optimally, and even your body, right? If you don't exercise, if you don't train, obviously you're not going to become a high performer. So before any of the analysis, we try to make sure that they're a well-rounded person through lifestyle factors, sleep, nutrition, occupation, studying, all those kinds of things. Next, we break down all the abilities of their brain into 5 areas. This is on a scale of 0 to 800, with 400 being average for their age. And immediately, for your players, we could start finding out stuff like this. Maybe Kyle really struggles with processing speed. He really struggles with shifting. Shifting is something you have to do all the time, because when you're on the soccer field, you're tracking well over 120 objects at once. Did you guys ever hear that before, or does that make sense to you, that number?
I've heard it through Mark.
Yeah, if you just think about it, there's 22 players on the field. For each one, you're tracking their feet, you're tracking their hands, you're tracking their bodies, their eyes. That alone, 22 times 4, you're already at 88. Then you talk about the sidelines, all the boundaries, the nets, the times, the scorekeepers, the referees, the officials, the coaches, the assistant coaches, your parents, all those things, and it adds up to be a significant amount of things. But we never work on it.
This is all subconsciously, right?
Exactly. Subconscious.
Okay.
We just expect that our players can go out there and track 130 things and do everything that we told them to do without needing to train it. And so things like inhibition or updating, This one right here, I hear coaches talk about it all the time. Spatial perception, football IQ, right? Knowing where the player is. Does he know where he is on the field, where opponents are on the field? We talk about all these kinds of things, but we never actually measure them. And now take a look at this. Lewis or Neil or Alison, imagine before you even met with a player, before you even worked with him, day one on your team, I was able to give you information like this. And I said, hey, just so you know, Neil, this kid often needs instructions repeated multiple times. So don't get frustrated. Don't pull out your hair, right? He has significant trouble finding the right words to describe things. He has significant trouble thinking of new plans if one doesn't work, right? We can all probably think of scenarios where we told a player, hey, do this, take it up the sideline. But if the defense takes it away, he's like a deer in headlights. He doesn't know what to do. He can't think of new plans on the fly. So all of these things, we can start to pinpoint even before you ever work with the person. He is able to concentrate, not easily distracted, forgets what was being said after being interrupted, all of these kinds of things. And now you can adapt your coaching style based on knowing this and what he needs. And then through all of this analysis, we'll create a personalized training program. So every day from just 10 minutes at home, he can be improving his cognitive abilities. The last part is a character. And personally, this is my favorite. I'm just going to show you one line here. It's the third line. It says, this is used by over 30,000 elite athletes from the NFL, NBA, MLB, MLL, US military, special forces. Like wherever performance matters, they use this. Do you know how many people are using this in Canada?
Not a lot.
Big fat zero. Nobody.
Really?
Nobody. And this is, yeah, and this is what we're bringing into the market, because we believe every single, even kids as young as 9 and 10 years old. Well, actually, for this part, you have to be 13. I apologize, I misspoke there. On the psychology side, you have to be 13 to be able to take part in this assessment. But now, like Alison, I know she mentioned she's working with kids, especially in the field of psychology. Imagine I was able to tell you, Alison, especially on some of those things you were talking, when motivating Kyle, do this. If he makes a mistake, do this. If you need to give praise to him, do this, right? We're now pinpointing the specific triggers of how you can get the most out of a certain person. As coaches, for the long time, we had to guess on this stuff, right? Sorry to cut you off. Alison, did you want to say something?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that's really awesome. It's almost like you do all the work for the coach to understand the player, and like that's a huge time saver. And like I said, like what I was working on was just trying to give pathways for coaches to understand their players better. But I mean, if you have a program that will do all of that for you, use keywords that you can apply in training, it's like, it's amazing. It's like, I mean, you can have this on your iPad on the field and just simply, you know, remember, oh, this person needs this and that, and you have it right there. It's fantastic.
Exactly. He didn't make the right he didn't make the right read on the field. He made the wrong call. Okay, he makes a mistake, do this. And these same situational tips that you're seeing here, the 8 of them, we provide the same situational tips for a coach, for a parent, and for the athlete. So right now, what you're seeing on the page is the athlete version. But for a coach, it might say, this is how Kyle thinks, so do this. For a parent, again, related on each of those things. Now, this is my personal favorite part right here. I used to work with, at the Raptors, I was working closely with a guy named Wayne Embry. The name may ring a bell for you. He's probably going to be in the Hall of Fame. Very, very well-respected legend in the NBA circles. And he has evaluated talent for close to 30 years. And the first time I showed him this, his jaw like dropped to the floor, kind of like that Travelocity commercial. There's an old caveman, and he's like, I've been searching for the perfect hotel for 40 years. You know that commercial I'm talking about, right?
Yeah, that's funny.
And he's like, how did you find it? And the girl's like, oh, I just went on Travelocity.com and it was right there. It was like that. He's like, I've been searching 40 years for a way to like measure these things. And I was like, oh yeah, I did this assessment in 20 minutes and here I got this information. So things like mental toughness, coachability, mental performance, I like to call this one clutch factor. But how well is that person going to perform under stress or under pressure, like a big game? How quickly do they learn a new play, a new language, a new skill set, a new position? Concentration, decisiveness, competitive desire, confidence, composure. all these terms that you see on the page here, do you guys preach these to your athletes?
Not always, not all of them, but some of them, yeah.
Do you feel they're important? Are there any that you feel are not important?
I mean, they're all related to the game. So I do agree they're very important.
But it's just hard to work on them, right?
Sorry, Abs.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was gonna say, out of all these ones, if we could all look at them, there's that one right there at the bottom, right on the screen there, that we all probably say to players when they're not performing well or something's bothering them. Hey, keep your composure, keep it up. We all say that. I know I had that coach say that to me. Stay composed, stay focused, all that kind of stuff. But again, if our composure is low, how are we supposed to do that? People can get under our skin just like that.
How does that composure differ? So you've got a score of 79 out of 100 for composure. How does that differ when you compose them in the beginning of a game, for example, when there's not a lot going on or the scores are level? How does that differ to when you're in hot phases of the game, so you're 1-1 with 5 minutes left and you're clean to go on goal?
Yep.
How does that differ composure score?
This particular score is not specific to a situation. This is more about the general demeanor of a person. So what this 79, for example, if Neil, let's say you did this assessment and you got a 79 on composure, what that would tell me about you in the work that I do is that in general, Neil, you tend to be a very calm, cool, and collected person. You tend to let things that bother you roll off your back rather than get under your skin. You tend to have an optimistic demeanor, and you don't tend to focus on the emotions around you as much as the task that you're focusing on. And as a result, this tells me that you're generally consistent when you're performing, and a bad call by a referee or something goes against you, that kind of stuff doesn't cause you to erupt or lose your composure. So it's not about differing in the start of a game versus the end of the game. It's about a person's demeanor and developing that kind of thicker skin or that ability to move on from things.
Emotional stability type thing, is it?
Yeah, emotional stability. That's exactly what this particular score is measuring. And on the confidence side, what I want to explain here is, I know these look like speed dials, and almost innately, like, we want to think that everything should be 99s. But I want to give you a very concrete example of how this is not the case. With each one of these things, a player can have a low score and also be very effective. So are any of you guys, I know all of you are big into football, like European football, but what about American football? Any of you NFL fans here?
Yeah, I watch it sometimes.
Okay, perfect. So I'm going to give you an example on the NFL side, right? You guys know what the offensive line is?
Yep.
And what's their job? Yeah. What's the job of the offensive line?
To score.
To protect the quarterback. The offensive line.
Wrong.
That's okay. That's okay. The job of the offensive line is to work together to protect the quarterback. So Bill Belichick.
That's like the Michael Orr movie, right?
Yes.
Blindside. Yes.
Exactly. Blindside is exactly the right example. So Bill Belichick of the New England Patriots, he believes in the system so strongly that he's been using it for 30 years. Since the late 80s, he's been using this exact system. It was used to have Tom Brady. It was used to create their entire organizational culture. And I mean, now they're probably a dynasty, and he's one of the greatest of all time.
So they're cheating. Look at that.
A lot of teams use stuff like this, man. And tell me, so one specific example, Bill Belichick seeks out players that are low in confidence for his offensive line. He seeks out players that are low in confidence for his offensive line. Can you think of any example why? Or any reason why?
Is it because they're more reserved in their own ability and they want to protect someone that's better?
You're kind of close, actually. So confidence here.
They won't question his authority.
Confidence here is a measure of someone's assertiveness, or someone's level of desire to assert themselves in a situation and take charge. And so on the offensive line, you have 5 people that need to work together, and they have to communicate and they have to defer responsibilities. Can you imagine if there was 5 guys in front of Brady and one guy said, "Hey guys, everyone back off. I got this. I'm going to guard Brady on my own." Yeah. That guy's a done deal. Brady's going to be on his back, probably on his way to the hospital very shortly. He needs guys that won't want to take charge. He needs people that will defer and work together, and no one will have an ego or feel like I can do this on my own.
And just like Alison mentioned earlier, communication. He wants them to communicate with one another. That's
So if you use a soccer example, your strikers, you probably want them to have very high confidence. You want them to take charge. You want them to feel like they can take over the game and do that kind of thing. But you might not necessarily want guys on your defense or your back line to have that kind of mindset. You want them to communicate, work together, no one takes charge, that kind of thing. So with each one of these traits, as you get deeper into the science, you realize there's situations and roles on your team where you want people to be low in some of these things, and certain roles where you want people to be high. For example, decisiveness. Decisiveness here measures how much a person likes to make quick decisions. It doesn't mean do they make the right decisions. It doesn't mean do they make good decisions. It just tells you how much does a person like to make quick decisions. Amongst you guys here, think about your own style. Like for me, I know I like to make quick decisions and move on. I don't second guess myself. I don't spend time reflecting on what could I have done in that situation? What should I have said? What could I have done? Right? But a lot of players do. And in certain situations, that
Would
kind
that
of... Yeah,
would
go
that
ahead.
differentiate? Would that differentiate between male and female?
A little bit, but not so much. But you're right, a little bit.
Because I know for just reading articles, and who knows, it could be right or wrong, but I know that CEOs and stuff like that for women, in terms of when they break down a problem, they'll do spider web thinking. So they'll get a problem, and then they'll just basically hash out all the possibilities of what's going on. Now, in the man's perspective, is sometimes what happens is, like you said, is this is the decision we're going through, we're doing it. Halfway through the problem, we're like, oh, you know what? We should have done it this way.
Yep.
You know what I mean?
Yep.
So we're backtracking. That's why I'm saying, is there a difference between male and female? And I could see it too in terms of coaching males, U16 boys, and coaching U16 girls. The connectivity with the female, it's got to be strong, and everyone's got to be on the same page. Because if it's not on the same page, you start breaking in areas. Whereas males, on the other hand, one person's not picking up the game. They're like, okay, I'm going to put you on my back. I'll take care of your position. Next person doesn't do the job.
Yeah, that's a really good one. But another example where you're going to see this happen a lot is, do you ever realize when players are very hesitant or very cautious? Like they're almost scared. They don't know what to do next. They're like
overthinking, right?
Overthinking and all of that. That comes down to decisiveness. And this is a trait that they can work on. They can build up that ability to not reflect on mistakes too much, to just be comfortable with making decisions, to adapt in that environment. So each one of these things, none of these are good or bad. That's the one thing I always say. None of these are good or bad, but it's important to know where you are. Baseline, just like everything else. And this part, we specifically provide for coaches. We generally don't give this to the players, but we always provide this to coaches. And this part is really, really powerful. Let me zoom in so you can see it here. You can see these are mindset indicators. You're obviously, all of us as coaches, we always say, you can't read your players' minds, right? We expect them to tell us what's wrong. We expect them to tell us what's going on. But now through this, we can actually see into their minds and see what are the indicators that make them who they are. So this particular person, he tends to be effective. He's pragmatic, realistic, and efficient. He also is gregarious. He has a desire to belong to a group and to be around people. So if we make him just work individual drills all day, he's going to be completely miserable. We can also tell this kid is a rebel. He likes to question rules. He likes to push the envelope. And so if you experience difficulties, just remember, he's not trying to be difficult. This is how he's wired. He needs time to recharge. He's a slow processor. You might have to repeat things for him multiple times. Things like this, in the past, we never knew information like this before, right? We've always had to guess. And so this makes it real easy for a coach to understand what are the things that I should probably be doing. And the final thing that we do, I think Alison would really love this part here, is we provide sports psychologist commentary directly from Dr. Robert Troutwine on a person's competitive nature, their coping style, their work style, their mental characteristics, social style, and their approach to learning. This would cost thousands of dollars if you were going to go sit down with a psychologist for each single one of your players and try to find out all this information. Through this one assessment, we give you not only all those situational tips, not only all the performance trait scores, but even sports psychologist commentary. on what this kid can do, what his parents and coaches can do to help him in each of these different areas. Off-season, coping style, dealing with pressure, dealing with obstacles. So
now I have a quick question. Sorry to interrupt.
Go ahead.
Is this a one-time thing, or would you suggest people get checked up, like, you know, like you said, do like the heads up checkup or whatever, or neck up checkup? Like, is it a yearly thing,
Yearly
a 6-month thing?
A yearly thing.
Okay.
On the psychology side, it's a yearly thing. On the visual and cognitive and on those areas, it depends on your performance goals. Doing it once a year is a minimum recommendation, just like getting a physical, right? Maintenance, routine, whatever. Yeah. But, you know, for example, I'll tell you from my experience, when I was with the Libs or Raptors or TFC, they don't just test their players once a year and call it a day. They're testing all the time. Think about it like a business. Businesses are calculating quarterly results, right? Quarterly profits, quarterly losses. They want to know how they're tracking because information is gold. And when you have more information, you can make better decisions and those kinds of things. So sports teams are operating very similarly. They should be testing quarterly, every 3 months or so. And we recommend about 4 months because, again, cost is another factor and other kind of factors come into play. So we recommend doing mental retesting every 4 months, but we've built it in as part of the program. So somebody doesn't need to keep paying and keep paying and keep paying to get retested. We have an annual program that incorporates testing throughout, as well as 12 months of personalized training. So that's kind of the structure of that. Now, that entire report that I showed you guys, it was a little long, right? Be honest with me. Would you want to read 30 reports like that for your entire team?
No, it's probably better to have jot notes.
I'll do you one better.
Because I can't remember if I showed you this or not. I think I did.
Yeah, you did. Yeah.
So better than jot notes. Now you're a coach. I know your time is valuable. I know your energy and your mind capacity is also limited because you have so many things going on. You can't look at 50 of those reports, and we recognize that. So what we do now is we'll put all the information in a dashboard for you. So you're the coach, you log in, you can see your logo, all your stuff here. You can see your U13 boys, U13 girls, U11 boys, U11 girls. You can see all your various teams that you manage. Now you come in, from a physical standpoint, this is either data you collect or we collect and we put it in here for you. And you can sort. You can sort, okay, I want to see all my tallest players. I want to see all my longest players, fastest, whatever. And another thing that we've learned over time is that no two people like to see data the exact same way. Personally, I hate looking at data like this. I'm not a numbers guy by any stretch of the imagination. Seeing rows and columns and just tables of data really pisses me off personally. But I love seeing information like this. And I don't know, you guys might have a preference. Maybe you prefer these scatter plots. Maybe you prefer this. But however you like to see information, we can show it to you in that way. Now, let's say, who should I put on the spot? Neil, let's say this was your team. And I said, here's your team results. What do you think is the one area based on the physical things that your team needs to work on the most?
Looking at this current statistics you got in front of me.
Yep.
Agility, lower body power, or speed? What do you think they need to work on the most?
It looks like agility on there, really. There's most reds.
Agility or this one, yeah, I would agree. And in general, your team is pretty strong.
Yeah.
And when it comes to the physical analysis, this is what most coaches get. The rest of the stuff, neck up, is usually neglected, right? As you guys know. But now imagine the same team. Let's say you guys have been training really hard, you've been practicing, you've been doing all the right things, but you're still not winning. And you're wondering, what else? What could be the problem here? And then you bring in Box Out, and we do an analysis of your team, and we show you this. What does this tell you about your team?
Depth perception.
Depth perception, maybe even reaction time, a little bit of near-far quickness. But these are areas that you wouldn't be able to tell from the surface level, right? You could be training 3 times a week. You could be doing all the right things, but never knowing this could be the difference between winning or not. So let's say, okay, we did this, and now you figured out, okay, your team really needs to work on depth perception and reaction time. So we'll get them some training, and they'll work on those things. And going back to the stages of performance, we can make sure that their vision is on point. But if their brain is not doing the right things with it, they won't be able to perform at a high level. So now this is the cognitive. What are the biggest opportunities for your team here?
Reasoning.
Yeah, I think so for sure. And then maybe memory to a lesser extent, right? And immediately you're able to see that, okay, my team is really struggling with depth perception and reaction time and reasoning and memory. These are 4 things that my team really seems to be struggling with right now. And now having identified it, you could probably do something with it. The real example here, this coach, the coach of this team that came to us to get his team tested, they had been the top team in the regular season for 4 years in a row. Okay, 4 years in a row, they were the top 3 team in Ontario in their age group, and they qualified for the offset championships. And every single year when they got to the offset championships, first round, gone, eliminated. Every single year for 4 years in a row. Great regular season team, get to the playoffs, first round, eliminated. And obviously the first time it happened, he was pissed off. The second time, he's like, okay, what are the chances? But the third and the fourth time, he's like, there's actually something wrong here. We got to figure it out. And then he came to the performance experts, he came to us. And as we evaluated his team, this is what we found out. Hey, coach, you never knew that almost your entire team was struggling with depth perception. You never knew that almost your entire team was struggling with reasoning. But particularly now, let's look at their mindset. Mental toughness, quite low for almost all of them. And keep in mind, these are like 14-year-old kids, right? Mental performance. How do they perform under stress, under pressure? Not great. And you can see here, there's a few players that are great throughout. Just like your teams, right? You all have a couple players that you're like, I know they'll do the job. I know I can rely on them. I know I can trust them. You always have a few. And you'll see that here. But then there's others that really need a lot of work. And at the end of the day, your team is as strong as its weakest link. I really believe that. Is that something you guys have heard, or do you believe that as well?
100%. Everybody's got to be working as a unit.
Absolutely.
And just going based off that quickly, just like, we always say practice players. We see these players show up in practice, show up in little scrimmages within the own team. But when you put them in a big game, you're like, where are they? What happened? We always ask, what happened? What happened? And that just shows you right there and there their mental execution, mental performance.
And I know, like, in all those years I was a coach, I would get into so many arguments with parents, because every parent thinks their kid is a superstar. And they're like, why did you not play my kid in that second quarter? Why did you not play my kid in that fourth quarter? Why did you not do this? Why did you not do that?
Well, especially here in Canada. Canada, it's the funniest, because they jump ship right away.
Yeah.
Right, okay, you know what? My kid's not going to go to this academy. He's going to go to this academy.
Yeah.
We're going from here to here. And it happens.
And they're shooting themselves in the foot, because they're taking this kid to 10 different teams. He never once gets to build any like trust and any friends. Coaches don't get to know him. They're shooting themselves in the foot with that approach. But now imagine as a coach, you could say, hey, listen, I'm not just pulling information out of my ass. I'm not just making decisions off the fly. Here's the information. This is where your kid is at. We can't argue with this, right? Men lie, women lie, numbers don't. This is where your kid is at. This is where I want him to be. And here are the things he will have to do to get there.
Christos, we said it the other day. Remember what we say? Every parent thinks they're the coach. They'll tell you, hey, don't listen to your coach. Do this way. Then you tell them, hey, don't listen to your dad or mom. Do it this way. Trust me, I see you. Do it this way. But they don't realize you're confusing the player.
I just usually tell them when the parents come into the picture, or they say my mom and dad said this. I'm like, you know what? I respect what they're saying. But the thing is, we're coaching as a team, so we're working as a unit. Everybody's got to work together.
Absolutely.
So your mom and dad is not coaching Marissa, or not coaching Ella. You know what I mean? They're coaching you, which is their kid. But what we're doing as coaches, we're coaching the team. We're coaching everybody. Yeah. So that's the big picture.
And
I think, like I said,
huge.
It's such a delicate balance.
It's interesting, because something that I find is that a parent can actually be such a useful secondary coach for a coach. So one of the things I was doing when I was the director of a U10 program, once a month, I would talk with all the parents collectively, talk to them about the goals and the language I was using with the players. And I created these sheets. I don't know if you guys know what Mad Libs are.
Yeah, I love
Yeah, yeah,
those.
Yeah. So I did this for the parents because I said, this is how you'll know if your player or your son or daughter is being accountable, is just ask them these questions, see what their answer is. You don't need to tell them the answer, but it's just for you to know if that player is understanding what's going on in the game. And I would send them out weekly so that, the parents are understanding what's going on with the kids. They're calm, and then also when I first started working with the teams, we had, the A, B, and C, and D teams. And I said to them, the first thing was, we're not going to be playing A, B, C, and D. You're giving the kids the wrong impression that if you're not on the A or B team, they're not good.
Yeah.
And I mixed all the teams up. I gave the best players responsibilities on each team to have like a buddy system to help the players that are weaker, so that they're gaining more leadership skills, so that when they do eventually go up in the leagues and get older, they can all be leaders instead of having like the two best players on, the A and B team be the leaders.
I love that.
And I found that the players were a lot more successful. And actually, a player that was originally on the D team 3 years later is now on provincials. And
Wow.
I had
That's awesome.
an email from one of the parents who said, if I didn't have that program set up for her to improve in a way that she did, that they don't think that she would even continue playing because she felt inadequate most of the time playing. It was more just for fun. But, we need to also understand that players grow differently. And I think that just, looking at it like, how can we support the player with the parents, giving the coach, or the support the coach needs for the players, and then giving all the players equal opportunity. I found that really helped the kids I was working with, really.
Yeah, I'm really glad that you shared that, because it's something I really agree with. And one thing that we try to provide is a common framework to bring parents, coaches, and athletes on the same page. They're always used to looking at things from a totally different perspective, and I'm right and they're wrong, and I'm right and they're wrong. Now, through the data, we are really aiming to provide a common framework so everybody can be on the same page. There should be no more disagreements about where is this player today. And then once you have that kind of alignment, it makes it so much easier to help them develop and get to where you need to go. And as you can see here, in this particular example, growth mindset. Is this something you guys talk about?
Yeah, we do talk about it, yeah. But
through research, it's been proven that there's the two best predictors of how successful a player or person will be in their life. The first one is right here, grit. This score is one of the biggest predictors, or best, most accurate predictors of how successful a person will be in their life. You want to have a very high score on grit. And the second best predictor is growth mindset. Grit, another word for grit, is resiliency. How much can a person bounce back? What is their breaking point? How much will they want to tough out those grueling situations?
tough skin, right? If they have a tough skin, you know what I mean? So
because it's guaranteed that life is going to toss you some bad lemons, right? You're going to have some ups and downs. You're going to have those difficulties, but how will you respond to that? So grit is the number one most important thing. Growth
I actually
mindset.
have a question. Sorry to interrupt you.
No worries.
No worries.
Part of my research I'm doing right now is talking with athletes at a professional level, not just football players.
Yeah.
But understanding what makes them an elite athlete. And one of the things that I've found in a common factor is they've had a lot of tragedy at a young age, or a trauma happened.
Big time.
Does that come into grit or to resiliency?
Oh, yeah. 1000%. That's exactly what it is, right? When you're dealt a tough hand, you're dealing with downs and things that are outside of your control, but how are you responding? And those examples you gave, that's exactly what it is.
Okay.
We spoke about this, I think, either on the last episode or the one before. We find that a lot of our better players who we scout or find within our local area or within the surrounding areas are generally the ones who are from sort of tougher backgrounds, broken homes, and they tend to be the more resilient, the ones are less less fearful of making mistakes.
Yep.
The more likely to try things, they're generally more talented, and that all round that part of the psyche tends to fit quite well with a lot of athletes. So
Yeah,
it's an Alison to find out what the numbers are on that, and the different athletes that you sort of interview and talk to, really.
yeah, and in those cases, they've been forced to develop grit. It's not that they necessarily wanted those struggles or those challenges, but they were forced to develop it. With a lot of athletes, they live a very privileged, a very cushy life, right? Mom and dad takes them to every game, takes them to every practice. They don't have to worry about food. They don't have to worry about anything. And as a result, they don't become as used to dealing with difficulties and tragedies and those difficult circumstances that inevitably will strike at some point. It happens to everybody. And if they're not prepared for it, then they don't
tend to want to expect things rather than having to work for them as well. So
yeah,
don't put as much extra work in as the players who found it tougher within their life.
And this particular dashboard just made it so clear for this coach. Like, every one of these kids believed that they could get better. That's what growth mindset is all about. How much do you believe your abilities can be improved? Every single one believed strongly that they could get better. But when it comes to things like their decisiveness, their grit, their mental toughness, their composure, this was horrible. Like, anytime a call went against them, they just crumble, right? Totally crumble, fall apart. And it was evidence in 4 straight years of underperformance when it came to the playoffs. But imagine having a tool like this, you guys as a coach, right? To see your entire team or your entire organization or everybody that you work with, to see where they're at. And then, as coaches, a lot of us come up with performance plans and things that we want our players to work on and things that we want them to do. But if you can base that in data, and if you can base that in terms of their goals and put it into language that they'll understand, it makes the process so much easier and so much more effective. So I thank you guys for just allowing me to share that. Hopefully it made it a lot easier than just we're talking about what Chris has seen, but you guys haven't. So that's a little bit more what we do for organizations. There's also like a bunch of other technologies and tools that we use, but the gist of it is to use technology and to use data the way they do it in Barcelona FC or with a lot of these top organizations around the world, now bring it down to the grassroots level. What would you guys say is the biggest challenge that you face as coaches? What's the biggest thing that you wish, I just need a solution for this?
Well, actually, so Abs and Marco, for the training that the 90% of the coaches in the country get, and I'll stick with soccer for now.
Yep.
Is it's pretty much mostly it's technical and some tactical. So out of the 4 quadrants, we tend to train out of those 2 because that's how we've been trained.
Yeah.
So if a coach goes out and gets this kind of information, a lot of them won't know what to do with it. Like I think that's the reality. Is the next step is, are you working with, or is there conversation about working with some of these organizations like Ontario Soccer or Canada Soccer on how to get this type of information? Now that they've got it, what do you do with it?
Yeah,
because
right.
A lot of them I don't think are trained in that manner, right? We're trained technically and tactically, but the mental part, that's not, we don't have a lot of tools to work with that.
So I guess the point being, wouldn't know what to do with it even if you got it.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
That's a very valid point for sure. Are there any others?
That's the next piece of your business. That's your expansion. That's how you can take this business to the next level. Is, okay, now that you got the info, here's how to make it work.
And just answering that quickly, just stepping in and answering is, even if you guys had this, even if we were to come in, it's not like, okay, here you go, guys, here you go, coaches, it's all on you. We would still be a part of the whole process. We would be doing all the work pretty much, but just making it easier on you because now you have a read. Because what we say is, we don't change your coaching plans, coaching styles. Do whatever you want, but now you know each individual player differently. Not saying 30 of them, here you go, this is what you got to do. Right? Because again, we just figured out, we know everybody is different. How many times have you guys seen in your time, because I know in my time playing and stuff like that also was 30 of us, we all knew we were different shapes and sizes, but it was the same workout routine for everybody.
Yeah.
Right? That was just a common thing. Okay, guys, all of you, let's go. Do this, 30 sit-ups, suicides, all this kind of stuff, but it's just not possible. You got different bodies, you got different people that, you know, work differently. You can't just expect that, but that's the norm. Just like you said, Chris, that's what we were taught, and that's what we were supposed to teach others.
See, what I find in academies, is they really push for excellency, right? So they really push for it. And I've heard coaches, personally myself, they just basically berate kids and they basically cut down on them. And this is so important in terms of the mental aspect behind it, is to get an assessment, get it done beforehand, understand where these players are coming from. Because if the player's there, right? Okay, not necessarily every player walking through that door is going to be an academy level player, okay? But the initial phase is them coming there, right? They want to be part of this. So I believe as a coach or as an organization, utilizing and giving them the tools in order to believe in that. Now, along the road, if they're not continuing doing and not keeping up with things, at least you know that you've done everything you can to help them. Because
absolutely.
Coaches, I see them all the time, man. They're like, oh, you're not good enough. You're not this. You're not that. Like, you're just trashing it, right? So.
Chris, like I said to you that when we first spoke, you know how many times I've heard from coaches in every sport, even from business people and stuff like that we work with. All I hear all the time is, I got people on my team, whether work or school or whatever it is, that are not coachable. I hear that all the time. And I go, what do you mean? What do you mean? And I go, first off, I always say that. You can ask Absis, I say this all the time. You got to have patience. You got to have patience at the end of the day. If you don't have patience, I say don't be a teacher, don't be a coach, because at the end of the day, we know these kids don't understand everything that we tell them. But again, we hope, we're guessing they do, and that's what you're saying. I go from the physical side, and anybody can answer this. If we know we want to work out, if we know we want to lose weight, put on muscle, be the fastest, what are we doing? What's the first thing we got to do?
Oh, we adapt to what we need to do.
What's the first thing that we have to do if we decide that we're going to, we already decide we're going to work out, we want to lose weight, but how do we know we're going to lose weight? How do we know we're going to put on muscle? What's the first thing we do? What'd you say? Sorry, Alison?
I said, for me, it would just be researching on
think very basic,
my goals.
very fundamental.
The most basic thing you would do first.
Oh, if you're gonna.
What did you say?
What did you say?
Get your weights.
There you go.
You measure yourself. You got to weigh yourself. You got to see, okay, this is what I weigh. This is what I want to be. You can't just start working out, training.
But not always. Not always. No, I'm just kidding. Because if you look visually,
you'll see the six packs coming. You'll see the six pack coming. But at the same time, we still don't know we're improving. Yeah, we can see it. We're guessing still. Okay, this is what I weighed. This is what I gained. This is what I got. But again, if we want to get straight kind of numbers, straight facts, we gotta weigh ourselves. We gotta weigh yourself. Yep. Okay, this is what I want. This is what I want to go to. Let's go. And you keep measuring yourself to see that. And that's what I'm saying. You see this through the physical side. It's everyone's always measuring. And now let's get to this level now. Let's do this. Let's see how you can get better. Let's see if you can get faster. Let's see if you can get stronger. So it just goes to show you is you got to do it for everything. You can't just pick and choose who you want to do it for.
Is your clientele just based out of Canada right now, or do you guys how does it work for you guys?
We have quite a few international clients, some in the States, some in Asia. For the most part, though, we are Canadian. I mean, we're a Canadian born and raised company. All the founders, everybody is Canadian, and this is really the landscape that we want to support more than anything.
Okay.
Chris Broom, you brought up a really good point earlier about coaches kind of focusing on two of those areas of that entire model of performance. And that's something I think about all the time, man, to be honest. Like, we're talking about all this stuff about the players, helping them have better vision, helping them have better character traits. But what about the coaches? Yeah. And to a greater extent, what about the officials, like referees? They're the ones that have the most impact on the game, and they're not doing any of this kind of stuff. They're reading like a rule manual and practicing blowing their whistle, and they think they're good to go for the next season. But that's where this stuff really needs to get into, right? Because as a coach, if you can't see everything that's happening on the field, how can you be an effective coach? How can you provide corrective instruction or all those kinds of things if you yourself are having a hard time necessarily seeing and processing all of those things? And to a greater extent, even the creation of your coaching staff or your management philosophy, oftentimes there's disconnect, right? On the management side of things. the GM or the president
Can I
wants
jump
to.
in on that for you
Yeah,
for a second?
absolutely.
Mhm.
I would love to.
One of the things I do with my players, because when a coach is focusing during the game, you can't focus on 11 players at all moments of the game, right? So when halftime comes, I usually have like a bunch of jot notes I've taken during the first half. I make my peace with the team, but then I let them go off into their positions and talk to their players and say, hey, what's not working, or what is working, and what can we do more? And sometimes it'll literally be like a player will say, hey, I have a bad matchup. This girl's faster than me. She's getting by me every time. I need to switch, or I need more support. And I find that when they actually communicate with each other, it's like, it's not them telling each other what to do. It's just a common fact.
Mhm.
So they're more interested in helping each other rather than coach telling them what to do.
Yeah.
And that, it's, working their decision making and their communication skills. And I find that that's something I use for them.
Because
I
something
can't see everything.
I do something similar. It's as you say, it's to create problem-solving skills, isn't it? So
Yeah.
I do almost the opposite way around, but the same, if that makes sense. So halftime team talk, I'll leave them to their own devices for 5 minutes and let them just. There might be silence. There might be one person talking to his teammate, if they're two centre backs, for example, or it might be a collective, like, we've got to do this to work out what they're doing. They've changed formation. What do we do? And then comes information. And I try and restrict it to maybe 3 or 4 points, and then done.
Yeah.
So it's nice and quiet. So again, they're almost doing a lot of it for you first, and then trying to improve their problem solving and mental capacities during in between the game. And then you come in with sort of the stuff that they might have missed, or some sort of way you want to improve the team as a whole, really. So again, same principles as you, Alison.
Yeah.
Those are two really, really unique approaches to helping these kids develop leadership and accountability and problem solving. How do you manage egos on your teams? Like, if you have a player or two players that are like naturally just much more gifted or skilled than the other players, how do you keep them in check and not let them feel like they're better than everybody else? Is that a problem that you face?
Sorry, go ahead, Alison. My bad.
Okay. I was just going to say, for me, I always give them challenges. Like, their trainings are usually a lot harder mentally. So I'll try to put them in more difficult situations. So if it's like a striker who's, really good at goal scoring, I can challenge them with adding more defenders and less support around them. I can have them create different roles, have them play in positions that maybe they're not good at, so they can have a little bit of humility and understand the other players on the field and what they have to do to make them look good, Or I'll give them incentives like, they might have a complete focus on, finding success in another player on the field, like looking to prioritize that player instead of themselves, or work on other skills they're not the greatest at, because then, they can build new skills, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I
That's
think
awesome.
It's difficult. It's different with different players, isn't it, as well? I think I've got, in my under-18s, I've got one player who's fantastic. He's better than the rest, but he's so humble. He's so willing to work with others and help others. Pretty much like, what you were trying to do, Alison, with the A, B, and C and D teams, that the better players helping the other ones. But then I've got another one who's a centre back who's very ego driven, and what I've done with him, he's really massive on having to go at other people when they've done something wrong, thinking he's the best. I ended up filming him specifically and showing him that, listen, you're not perfect. You're not doing all these things correctly all the time. So, try and work on what you can do to improve yourself, but understanding that other people will make mistakes around you as well, which I thought was really important for him. But he's a difficult one.
and I love that you said that, like, that you're not perfect, because at the end, that's what we tell everyone at the end of the day. Nobody's perfect. Nobody. And people who are telling you they're perfect, they're lying. No, but because at the end of the day, we all make mistakes. It's how we learn from those mistakes, and that goes a part of the growth mindset. Learning from these mistakes, looking at these as opportunities, and going forward. Not always sticking in that same kind of routine.
Coaches coaches that we've worked with in the past, they tend to view like the box out testing as the great equalizer. It brings everybody down to earth, and it shows everyone that, hey, you're not Cristiano Ronaldo, you're not the best in the world, and there's things that you can work on. And when everybody on the team realizes that, hey, none of us are perfect, and this is the same kind of revelation that we get when we work with corporate clients or sports clients or anyone, but people, it humanizes everybody, right? It brings everybody down to the same page and says, you know what, none of us are perfect. There's things that each of us need to work on. And as a team, we are all responsible for making ourselves the best version of ourselves so that our team can do what we need to do. That's just something I've heard from other coaches that they really like, that it's kind of like a great equalizer amongst everybody.
Yeah, I just want to touch base on that. Like usually we talk about finding personal excellence and then creating like an excellence within the team. Like to have like a certain standard of excellence, and then individually can we succeed or become optimal as possible.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's another great way. Like I say, it's like you nailed it right on the head at the beginning, saying communication. And from what, again, I don't know you that well, but I know that that's what you really strive for, and that's what you continue to do. And that's the biggest thing in everything with coaches. You got to communicate. It's so important, and you got to get the team to communicate.
Assumed knowledge is the most dangerous thing. Assumed knowledge. If you assume,
oh yeah,
and they don't, that's the most dangerous one.
Yeah.
I think, like I said, everything has been. The product that you guys have is fantastic. And when I saw that report and I went through it, and we talked, Marco, and now having this talk here, I think it's awesome. I think it's good to get those connections with people, because when you have like-minded people and you can push it in terms of opening it up and showing the other coaches, and there's nothing, the other coaches, I think they don't see the big picture. You know what I mean? Maybe they put it back in their subconscious, and when you actually talk about it to show them and see the possibilities of what we should be doing in terms of mentally and helping players, parents, coaches, I think that's the big benefactor for this, right? So
education, we always say it, because even when you went through the report with her report there, you saw some of the things, coach situational tips. You saw, like, I am doing this. Yeah. But what did that leave you? That left you with, you were at ease. You didn't have to guess anymore. I remember you said to me, like, oh my God, like I feel so much of a relief now.
Well, because you identify what's going on, right? And you understand, you see it. It's right there, and you're going, I can replay back the practice sessions and looking back and going, oh yeah, that makes sense now. So now I don't have to, I can attack it a different way, you know what I mean, to help the player out. So a quick question, again, thanks guys it was awesome. And I think you guys have the emails there, you guys can connect and stuff like that and go forward with that after this. But one question I have is, again, Alison, when you were talking to my girls, the positive feedback from there has been fantastic. You know what I mean? They really, really loved it. And how do we go with motivation in terms of, because now here in Canada, I don't know if we're going to get back to the outdoor season. Right now, it's really, the timelines are really getting down to the not going to be continuing with the summer season. So I know we can do all the ball mastery, we can do all the strength and conditioning, but again, this is going back to individual work. What would you guys recommend as a whole here? How do you motivate and continue motivating these individual players to continue with their individual success? How do you do that? There we go. Okay, awesome.
I mean, personally, for me, I like to challenge people, or I like to be challenged. So I'm actually going to be working with, I think the Instagram is called Phil World. He's based in Washington, and he's hosting 1v1s online, and I'll be one of the judges. So what he's doing is connecting players, a lot of female players actually, all youth, playing 1v1s, where he'll drop a beat. It's kind of like, think of like 8 Mile, Eminem style. He'll drop a beat, and you have 30 seconds to give us your best moves on the ground, keep ups, whatever it is.
Oh, wow.
And then you have 5 coaches that have played, or not coaches, players that have, or ex-players who will judge. And it's basically like a World Cup, because every week he's doing these challenges, and then the players are advancing every week, and you can follow them, and it's fantastic because it's just a way of expressing yourself with the ball. Even if you're not a technically good player, it's a way to like motivate yourself to be like, oh, okay, I'm going to go on YouTube and learn a new move or learn something, and now I get to show it to my friends or show it to Instagram world, and I find that like it's really cool.
That's awesome.
That is awesome. That's fantastic. Abs, you brought this up, but do you wanna go on that?
Sorry, I was going to say that seems like a really engaging way to do it. That sounds like a lot of fun. I was just going to share this framework that we use. We've identified that no two people are the same. And when we're working with teams, we can really find out what their deepest inner kind of motivators are, like what drives them. And as coaches, we tend to use a single method of motivation often to, hey guys, let's go get this championship. But maybe that's not what each person really wants. Like, for example, for an engineer, they really want to be able to solve a problem, and then they just want to be left alone. They just want to solve that on their own. With other people, they either want to feel like the underdog, or they want to feel like they're not respected. Some people want challenges from lofty people. So I know Marco is more the knight and engineer type. For me, I'm more of the maverick. So when I feel disrespected or when I feel like the underdog, that's what pushes me to, take my things up to another
100%.
level. And each person is totally different. You'll have players that really just want to please their parents. They really just want to please their coach. And that's what will motivate them. And like I said earlier on, it's about finding out each person's trigger points. When you can do that, you'd be amazed at how much actual scientific evidence there is for like how we work, how we actually work. I was shocked when I first learned all this stuff. I was really shocked. But it's very, very accurate. And so that's kind of how we deal with motivation. Like, we try to avoid guesswork, and we try to go based off of what we can actually identify and then work on.
Well, guys, you know what? Awesome. Thank you very much for coming out and giving us talking about Box Out. Again, Marco, I'll be in contact with you in terms of with my team and stuff like that. Yeah. Coach Chris, there's something that we could talk about. Hopefully we can bring it also to Storm. Talk about in terms of the rep level, talk to parents, players and stuff like that. Neil, Alison, and Lewis, this is something that I hope you guys enjoyed. You know what I mean? We consistently do this soccer talk every week. I'd love to have you guys come back out as guests as well, for sure. 100%. And and this is just something we always do. We just have soccer talk. We talk with people, and when are you going to get this? I believe is when you're going to get this opportunity, when things do go back to some kind of normality, to sit down and have everybody talk here, right? We have to schedule time, place, where you guys are overseas. we're not gonna take the plane ticket all the way over there to sit down, right? So I think this is a fantastic way to connect with people. And again, Abs, I do apologize for the intro there. You have to understand my tablet here. I only have like 4 people at a time.
It's all good.
And unfortunately,
just like you said, Crystals, he likes being the underdog. He was okay with it.
You were on my last page, and I was like, "Oh yeah, man, there we go."
No, it's all good, and I really enjoyed being here with you guys. I just want to leave you with one thing, just one takeaway. In the last 5 to 6 years, I've probably interacted with hundreds of coaches and athletic directors and program directors, and we often get a lot of mixed reactions. Some people really love it. Some people are like, this can never replace the human touch, and we get all sorts of reactions in between. But the one thing that I'll leave you with is that I've done a lot of study of psychology and how the human brain and human mind works when it comes to the decisions we make and the way that we act. And the one thing that holds a lot of people back is this thing called the status quo bias. We tend to stick to things that we really understand well and that we're comfortable with. We often feel uncomfortable trying out new concepts and new theories and new ways of doing things because of the uncertainty. We don't know how it will end up. We know we're not experts in it, and that often prevents us from trying out new things. This is kind of like a known thing. You can Google it. It's not something that impacts just one of us. This impacts all of us. We have a tendency to stick to things that we are comfortable with and that we understand. And I know this is a brand new concept, and a lot of people have never seen this before, but all I would encourage you to do is just try it out for yourself, because we can talk about it as much as we want, but until you try it out for yourself, until you see your own results, until you see what this can tell you about yourself and help you from your own personal development standpoint, it'll be much harder to talk about implementing it with a team or an organization or anything bigger. So it just starts with yourself. If you have any questions, need any clarification, don't be afraid, don't be nervous or anything. Like, we're only here to help. The number one thing that prevents people from getting to where they want to go is fear. Fear of not knowing, fear of making a mistake, and all those things. And I just want to encourage you guys to be completely comfortable with us. And we're only here to help as much as we can. We want to take human development to a different level.
And just going, sorry, Alison, go ahead.
I just wanted to say, like, that's really fantastic. And I wish like more people will invest in you. I really hope that in the future, because that's something I really believe in. Also, I had the opportunity in the summertime to talk with Pep Guardiola, who's like one of the best coaches or managers in the world. Mm-hmm. And one of the things he said as a coach that helps him humanize with his team that he coaches is he learns one thing new per season, whether it's an instrument, whether it's learn something about another sport or another athlete, or he takes a challenge, because he said when you're coaching, you need to remind yourself when you're learning something new, how it feels. And then when you project that onto new players, new situations, a new philosophy, new methodology, they're in a situation where they're going to feel uncomfortable, and you need to remind yourself how you feel when you're in an uncomfortable position. So I just, really I really agree with everything you said.
That's actually, wow, that's actually crazy, because I do that with my clients. I learn from them still. I'm learning from them. It's a learning process for all of us. Even as coaches, we're all learning. As time goes on, we might be the experts in some things, but as time goes on, we learn new things as well. And that's part, again, about growth mindset. And that's why it's so important. And just going back on the status quo thing that he says, just think it from a soccer perspective. We all know soccer has been last to every race out there, to all the other sports.
Instant replay, performance science,
even all this stuff. They were the last one to the race. All the other organizations, top 4 organizations, top 5 organizations, has been using this for the last 20 plus years. Soccer, 2017, 2018, they came on board.
Wow.
It just shows you. Soccer has always been that status quo bias, like what Abs has said. But now it's time for our generation, sort of say, to change that.
That's awesome. Awesome. Well, guys, thank you very much. And again, we'll have. I'd like for you guys to come back out, and we do this weekly. So I'll send out invites. And again, thank you very much for everything, and enjoy the rest of your days. I know here in Canada it's sunny. I got work to do in my backyard in terms of fixing more things. But other than that, guys, thank you again, and enjoy the rest of your days. And I'll keep in contact with you guys through Instagram.
Yep.
My Instagram, if you're not on there, it's Coach Christos. If you guys want to do a shout out to your own Instagram, by all means, you guys can go right ahead. And yeah.
100%. Thank you, everybody. Look forward to connecting with you. It was really nice meeting you all. Have a great weekend.
Thank you, guys. You guys take care. Enjoy it. Talk soon.
Bye-bye.
Bye, guys.